Coming off my last reflection, where I used Elegy for a Dead World to for an example as to what game design is and what makes a good game and everything. Well, this time I'm going to still be talking about game design, but instead of using a video game, I'm going to be using two articles that I recently read to actually get my point across with what is game design and actually how do you design a game. The first article I will be addressing is one that was written by James Wallace. In his article, he talks about how games offer little and extra story creation, how the stories are often already coded in, and that this doesn't make a good game, and that designing games this way isn't the proper way to design games. That the way to design games is you have to make it to where the players actually are creating the story as they move along in the narrative. He actually even bashes and even dogs on games that already have pre-in stories and that aren't stories where the player is creating it, and says that it pretty much is that's the only good way to develop a game, is a game where the player creates the story. But there is no right way to design a game. And actually, in an article I read, this time it was written by a man by the name of Henry Jenkins, he even addresses very early on that game design doesn't even have to have a clear-cut story in its mind, or even a story at all. Some of the most popular game franchises in history don't have a story at all, one of them being Tetris. But still, Tetris is designed very well and is very enjoyable, and the mechanics work, and that's what his big point is just because a game doesn't focus on story creation doesn't mean it's not being designed in the proper way. Because, as he puts it, a game really should focus on world building and actually developing the mechanics before it should even step into trying to develop a story or characters. It is much easier to develop a story that can work and exist in your mechanics and the world you are developing as a game designer, as opposed to creating this characters or just knowing what you want to do with developing a story, or have your player create the story and then having your mechanics and world develop around that. It's very backwards. And that actually gets me into the topic, as I actually side with Jenkins on this a lot, because that's how I would like to design a game. And now, I'll admit I did go wrong. I'd used the method where I didn't develop a world at all. Myself and my fellow game designers, we actually developed characters for our game before we even had really thought of a clear-cut story or what the mechanics were going to be. However, we did do something right, which is why I really enjoyed it, was we created a world in which we knew where we wanted our characters to exist. We knew what we wanted the characters in the world, where they were going to exist, but we didn't know how they were going to interact with the world, and I think that's where we went wrong, is because we focused too much time on character development instead of focusing on the world building and developing solid mechanics. And that's what game design really should, at the root of it, is developing mechanics in the world, not the story. Mechanics in the world building first, and then the story and the characters will come off on that.